Hello and welcome. Today we're tying the Ben Ish Chai method of Tzitzit. Now, one important thing to note is that this, if you're using techelet, is normally done with the techelet only on one side, so you have one thread out of the 8. But we're going to start with the simple double knot. Use your 2-finger twist to open it up and pull everything through. Tighten it down. 2-finger twist, pull everything through, tighten this almost up to the edge of your talit, and then just to keep it from scrunching up on the edge of your talit, put your finger in there, pull towards you as you tighten to keep it from cinching down that first half of the knot. Now, jumping into the wraps, you want to start out when you're using techelet. As with most of these, when you're using techelet, you want to start with a white wrap at the top. So we're going to use our hand in an L shape with our finger pointing up. We're going to go around the core and then up through that loop that's held open by our finger. And just tighten it up. And when you tighten it up, pull it up towards that double knot as high as you can get it and really tighten these first loops down. Get them nice and tight. Really, that's just to give you a good uniform appearance. So now you're going to move on to your blue shamash. Take your blue shamash and run it through in the same way, holding your hand in this sort of modified L shape. Pull it nice and tight. And we're going to do this one more time. And here, after this, is where we get to what's a pretty unique characteristic of this particular tying method, which is the split between sets of windings. So once we've got this all down, we've got our 3 good windings nice and tight. We're going to split the core and pass this shamash through. Now, because of this split and the way the windings are, this method takes a lot of shamash. So you'll see we may even run out. Now I'm using hobby string, and I cut sort of a standard length for all of these, but this one uses a lot of string. So when you split, on your first split, tie a temporary knot in one side of this, and you're just going to do this sort of temporary slip type knot so that you can easily split these two. It'll really come in handy with the amount of splits that you're going to do, and then when you're done, you can easily pull that knot out and finish it up. But it really helps with the splits. So when you split, you're separating the two, you're pulling it through either from the back or the front, doesn't matter, whichever makes sense with the position of the shamash, and then you're going to continue wrapping. Same thing, using that L position, finger hold, and then tightening up just the same as the last time. Get it nice and tight. Now, as you go through this, you may change hand positions here. You can do this if it's easier. It's really up to you. I think the L shape gives you a lot of wide space to work with. So that's what I'm going to try to stick to through these demonstrations. But as you go through and you get more comfortable, feel free to position your hand however makes sense. This is just a little tip, this L shape. So we're going through, and you can see on the diagram on the right hand side here that the sequence changes. So this follows the 7, 8, 11, and 13 wraps per Huya method, but there's the split, and that's what you need to pay attention to make sure that you get the split in the right place. So again, we're going to split, and you can see this time it just made sense to go through the bottom and up to the top because of the positioning of our shamash. And again, I just really want to stress the importance of pulling these all very tight and pushing them up. You want a little gap between each set of windings. That's what gives it its distinctive look. But push it up and pull it tight to make sure you conserve as much of the shamash as possible, because this really uses up a lot of it. So now we're moving into our second set of double knots. 2-finger twist, pull through and tie. 2-finger twist, pull through and tie. And you can see how this temporary knot even helps with this part. Alright, so there's our first hulyah, and moving on to the second, we're going to do 2 wraps of blue and a split, 3 wraps and a split, 3 wraps, and then our next set of double knots. Now as you're tying these, you'll start to notice that each set of windings sort of takes a natural position, and as you pull it tight, it will follow this ridge on each set of windings. But from set to set, it will be in a slightly different position, and this kind of gives you this sort of circular winding method there. So now we are coming to the end of our, make sure we count it out, and we're at the end of our second hulyah and going into our next set of double knots. So 7 twists total on the first, 8 on the second. Make sure you're counting these before you tie these double knots to save you the trouble of backing everything out just to add a single wrap. Now you can start to see that we're getting a little bit short on the shamash. As I mentioned, you can run out of this. So I want to bring this up now while we're watching the third hulyah go through, and at this point I think you probably have the technique. You just watch a few more times. So I'll talk through a little bit of this now. When you start to run low on a shamash in any tying method, it is considered acceptable to switch to a different shamash, right? Now, if you're using all white, that's not a problem at all. If you're using blue on a method like this, where, as I mentioned earlier in the video, you would normally only have the shamash on one side, it is going to be a problem. You really need to conserve it and make sure it's long enough in the first place. But I just wanted to mention this because, halakhically, as far as all of the authorities that I've found, there is there's nothing preventing you from changing threads part way through. And we're going to do that later on. By the time we get down towards the end of this hulya or the next one, we're going to switch to that other blue thread, and that's really not ideal, but it can be done, and we're going to do it here just to continue with the demonstration and show you the entirety of this tying method. Again, this particular hulya has 3, 3, 3, and then a set of 2. And as we move on from this one to our last one, the sequence will be 1, 3, 3, 3, and then a sequence with 2 blues and a white. And so between each of those sets, you're splitting. And that's it. This is a very nice, sort of complicated looking tying method. I'm a really big fan of it. And also, Ben Ish Chai, a big fan of the sort of feeling that he brings to this mitzvah in his writings. So if you get a chance, it's worth checking that out. All right, so now we're down to our last hulya, and you can see we're getting short on this shamash, as I mentioned earlier. So I may switch this. I think I'm going to go ahead and untie my temporary knot on this right side and retie it on the left side. And I'm going to go ahead again. It's not ideal, but it is acceptable in cases where you have 2 blue threads, one on each of the splits here. So 2 out of 8. It is okay to do this. Normally with this one where you'd only have 1, you would not be able to do it. Again, I sort of mentioned this already, but just to restate it. But just for the sake of finishing up this demonstration and showing you the finished product, I'm going to separate out this other shamash, and we're going to switch. And again, you know, we really don't have a lot of room to work with here. And towards the end, regardless of that situation, towards the end of this last hulya, you may need to undo that double knot just because you're not going to have enough room on the cord to hold it down all tight. And you'll see me do that. Right, now as we're coming close to our finish here, really running low on that blue shamash. Here you can see I'm pulling one through, keeping it with the core, and actually switching back, alternating shamashim here, just to make sure that I can get this completed. So make sure you select a set of threads. If you're using the techelet, make sure you select a set of threads that has sufficiently long shamash. Now, again, if you're using white, this really isn't a problem. You can switch back and forth. I recommend doing it, trying to use the same shamash for an entire huliyah. But if you can't do it, you can switch in between sets of windings. I would not recommend switching in the middle of a set of windings. It will cause it to look a bit irregular. So we're moving on to our last one with barely enough here. We're going to pull this through, and we're doing 2 wraps. Just 2 left to get out of this. And I'm really working to tighten these up as tight as I can, just to make sure I have enough. And with those 2 final blue wraps done, we're going to separate out our white shamash, white thread, and wrap it one final time. Tighten it up very well. Then we're going to separate out our 2 sides and do our final double knot. Again, just barely enough of that blue to work with. And as I mentioned, for these demonstrations, I'm just using hobby string and sort of cutting them all to the same size. So you may see these in some of my videos where a little mix-up and not quite long enough or something like that. But we'll just talk through it and recognize that when we're tying these with our good strings, that we shouldn't have these kind of problems. You can see those 2 little short. We balanced them out pretty well, but both of them ended up very short. Anyway, there you have it. Thank you.